Today, we're really cutting through the noise. We want to give you the ultimate shortcut to understanding one of life's biggest puzzles, the actual science of personal transformation.
That's right. And our mission today really is to figure out why it's just so hard sometimes to break those negative patterns.
Yeah.
What is your brain's actual default setting? And crucially, how can we use science to overwrite that programming and make real lasting change?
There's this leading neuroscientist who states your brain is 2.5 times more strongly wired to avoid risk than it is to get a reward.
Wow. 2.5 times. That's a massive figure, isn't it? That deep wiring, it totally explains that feeling of inertia, that huge internal drag when you try to start something new, like a new business or go after a big goal, manifest a new relationship even. Your primitive brain, your core, is hardwired to just prioritize safety, stay in the cave, above all else.
Right. So if your brain is literally wired to keep you safe and, well, small, our task is pretty clear. We're not just talking about motivational fluff here. We're looking at actual proven neurological hacks to override the system that keeps you stuck.
Let's unpack that toolkit.
Okay, but first, we really have to acknowledge that ancient wiring. Our survival mechanism, it prized loss avoidance, big time. Think about it. If you risked hunting too far from the cave, you might actually die. Simple as that. Now, in the modern world, this translates into avoiding a healthy career change or delaying asking for that raise or putting off difficult conversations. So to achieve anything really meaningful, you have to actively convince your brain the risk is worth the reward. You got to override that 2.5x fear thing. And that challenge leads us straight into this often misunderstood idea of manifestation. The sources we looked at are super practical here. They warn that manifestation is absolutely not about just creating some lofty fantasy and then sitting back, waiting for the universe to deliver it with zero effort from you.
No, definitely not. True manifestation is about daily engagement. It means you have to be doing something, even a tiny step every single day, moving closer to that goal, which is why we maybe need to change the language we use, those visual cues. The sources suggest ditching the term vision boards because it sounds passive, and instead embracing the idea of action boards.
Action boards, I like that. That focus on accountability, but that also means setting expectations properly, right? Because if your action board is full of, say, immediate goals that are just totally unattainable right now, buying a remote island next month, whatever, you're basically just setting yourself up to fail.
Exactly.
And that repeated failure just reinforces the negative loop, the one that says, see, change never works for me.
Precisely. You just reinforce that stuck feeling.
Right.
It's much better to aim for something doable, a short-term goal, like securing a down payment or finding the right mentor. Build up from there, rather than aiming for the absolute peak straight away. And crucially, the motivation has to be intrinsic. This is sometimes called a magnetic desire.
Magnetic desire, meaning it has to be so personal, so resonant, that it pulls you forward, not something you feel pushed into by external stuff.
Correct, yeah. If your goal is mostly guided by what your parents think or your career path expects or what society says you should want, it just lacks that emotional glue, that stickiness. And it's way less likely to survive when, challenges inevitably pop up.
Okay, so to make sure that desire is really authentic, it needs alignment across 6 different ways of thinking. We kind of get logical and emotional alignment, but what about aligning your goal physically, intuitively, motivationally, and creatively? What does that actually mean?
That's a really great question because physical alignment, that's often the missing piece. Let's say your goal is to become a top athlete. Okay, fine. But if you are not physically prioritizing sleep, hydration, proper training, then your head and your heart aren't aligned with your gut, the physical reality of your body. They're disconnected. Intuitive alignment is about listening to that gut feeling. Is this goal genuinely yours? Or is it just someone else's idea of success that you've adopted?
Okay, so if we accept action is needed and alignment is key, this next concept feels really counterintuitive to me. The sources suggest that sometimes the actual wanting itself can be the biggest block because the act of wanting sends out the signal to your brain and maybe even the world that basically says, I'm lacking this thing.
This is the core idea behind the quantum identity shift. If you keep focusing on trying to get something, you're just confirming your current state of not having it over and over. The secret then isn't about what you want to achieve, but who you become. You have to shift your focus completely. Stop trying to get rich. Become the person who is naturally confident, decisive, creates massive value. That new identity is what actually magnetizes the outcome to you.
Okay, so this isn't just some philosophical idea floating out there. This has real biological roots, right? Particularly with that tiny but like super powerful part of the brain, the reticular activating system, the RAS.
Oh, the RAS is phenomenal. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tucked away in the brainstem, and it basically functions as your brain's internal filter. It's a bouncer, if you will.
Yeah.
Think about it. Our senses are constantly bombarded. Over 5 million bits of information every single second. It's insane. But the RAS is like the security guard at the door, only letting maybe 1% of that flood into your conscious awareness.
Wow. And that 1% is determined by what the RAS thinks is important for you right now.
Exactly, yeah. Think of the RAS as a highly biased search engine. It's looking for what you've told it matters. So, if you constantly visualize and affirm your new identity, let's say, I am a person who sees creative solutions to challenges. You are actively programming your RAS. It then starts filtering your world differently. It prioritizes opportunities, connections, bits of information that match that new profile, that decisive self, and it filters out all the other distracting noise it doesn't fit.
That makes perfect sense. It's like a biological feedback loop, and it's based on neuroplasticity, the brain actually changing physically. But that physical nature of change, that's where the frustration comes in, isn't it? People get impatient.
Impatience is the absolute enemy of neuroplasticity. We tend to think of change as just, flicking a switch, changing a thought. But the sources make it really clear. Changing neural pathways is physical work. It's heavy lifting for the brain. It involves connecting new neurons together, literally growing nerve cells, adding insulating coats, myelin sheaths to make those new pathways faster and more efficient.
It's like learning to ride a bike, maybe. Feels clumsy, impossible. And then suddenly it just clicks.
Precisely. A perfect analogy. You have to be patient because it takes sustained, deliberate effort to reach what they call a critical mass of these new, stronger neurons. Until you hit that point, the old pathways are still the path of least resistance. They're the default. And that's why it often feels like you're just spinning your wheels, getting nowhere.
But the dangerous flip side is that neuroplasticity can work against us too. The brain doesn't care if the pathway is positive or negative, right? It just cares that it's used frequently, which leads to negative manifestation.
Yeah, exactly. The easiest example is dwelling on a past mistake or obsessing over a relationship that ended badly. Every single time you rerun that negative story in your head, I always get overlooked, or I should have known better, whatever it is, you are physically strengthening the neural circuit for that negative pattern. You're paving that negative road. And if you don't consciously override it, you're basically wiring yourself to repeat that same pattern again in the future.
Okay, so we can't just erase the old pattern. We have to overwrite it, build a new road. That brings us to the 4 steps for successfully rewiring your brain. Let's make sure we walk through these carefully.
Okay, step 1 has to be raised awareness. Always. Before you can change anything, you need to know the script you're currently running. This takes dedicated time, at least a month. The sources suggest monitoring your thoughts, your underlying beliefs. Maybe through journaling or talking regularly with a coach or a therapist. You're just asking, what is the actual pattern here?
Then step 2 is focused attention. Once you've identified the script, say, it's a tendency to self-sabotage money opportunities. You need to start noticing that specific pattern as it's happening, in real time. The goal isn't even to judge it at first, just catch it. Interrupt the automatic process, even for a split second. Then eventually you can start to reframe it.
Right. Then step 3, which is often the hardest part, deliberate practice. This is where the physical rewiring really happens. You have to regularly, consciously practice the new desired behavior over and over until it becomes so familiar, so easy, that it's actually less effort than falling back into the old habit. So if your old pattern is defaulting to anger when you get criticized, the deliberate practice is consciously pause, take a breath, maybe verbally acknowledge the feedback before you respond. You have to practice that pause relentlessly until it becomes your new automatic reaction.
And the final crucial piece is accountability. This is like the safety net, right? Stops you from just giving up when things get tough or plateau. Whether it's a partner, a coach, a therapist, or even using digital tools like habit trackers for those micro habits, you need some kind of external support to measure progress and keep you focused on the vision.
Absolutely. And even before those steps can fully work, there's this underlying issue of deservingness that needs to be addressed. This is where those deep, non-conscious beliefs can really trip you up. We see it with the action board sometimes. People will pick out powerful, inspiring images, things they consciously want, but they never actually stick them down. They can't commit. It's like, literally, they can't finalize the vision because some deep hidden part of them believes, I'm not actually allowed to have that. I don't deserve it. Addressing that fundamental lack of self-worth often has to happen before the behavioral steps will truly stick.
That's deep. Shifting gears slightly, I find it really reassuring that all this modern neuroscience is actually validating ancient wisdom. We tend to think of anxiety and mental strain as like purely modern problems. But the sources point out that these themes, wellness, how to handle distress, they're central even in texts like the Bhagavad Gita, which is what, 5,000 years old?
Exactly. And that ancient wisdom points directly to modern concepts like neuroaesthetics. The simple idea that spending time in nature creates this awe-inspiring feeling. Yeah. And that feeling positively shifts your brain state. And the science now confirms it. Time in nature boosts mental health, physical health, longevity, even immunity. It's a direct chemical route to reducing stress.
And these practices are so important because, chemically speaking, we're always kind of operating on a seesaw between two main states, aren't we?
Absolutely. It's a constant balance. On one side, you've got cortisol, the stress hormone. It correlates directly with those 5 key negative emotions: fear, anger, disgust, shame, and sadness, the big ones. On the other side, you have oxytocin, the bonding hormone, the love drug, some call it. And that correlates with love, trust, joy, excitement, all of the good stuff.
Okay, so how do ancient rituals then, things like chanting or humming, drumming, how do they actively move us from that cortisol side over to the oxytocin side of the seesaw?
It's fascinating, actually. They create vibration and resonance in the body. And this leads to a phenomenon called entrainment. When a group does these activities together, singing, drumming, even dancing, their heart rates and sometimes even their brain waves start to synchronize, they lockstep. This creates a powerful state of collective coherence. It immediately fosters cooperation, reduces that feeling of us versus them, and fundamentally shifts the brain into the oxytocin state. You're basically chemically training your body to feel safe and connected with others.
Wow. So if we're doing this work, actively rewiring our brains, we inevitably have to look back where those negative patterns started. How do we look at old traumas or disruptions without just falling into a spiral of self-criticism or judgment?
Yeah, that's a delicate balance. This is where the concept of ghosts in the executive suite is really helpful. It refers to the wiring that gets embedded, usually in the first 7 to 14 years of life. All those subconscious rules you learned about boundaries, values, secrets, family roles. That stuff is mostly non-conscious when you're an adult, but it still drives your executive behavior, your big decisions. For example, if you grew up in a home where the constant unspoken message was money is somehow bad or dirty, that ghost will likely sabotage your financial decisions as an adult, even if logically you know it's not true.
That really shows the power of those hidden programs. But the expert view also reframes disruption. It's not just a wound, but potentially an opportunity for growth.
Yes, the Weiss and Virtue model. It suggests that childhood trauma or major disruption can actually be an opportunity for something to go really right. It's paradoxical. For instance, they found that a significant disruption between the ages of 5 and 7 often results in one of two extremes: either deep feelings of inferiority or intense industry, meaning incredibly hard work. A lot of highly successful people experience that specific disruption, but instead of crushing their self-esteem, it drove them towards relentless hard work, maybe towards financial independence, often as a kind of protective mechanism. So it reframes the wound as potentially a source of incredible drive.
That's a really powerful and actually quite compassionate way to look at it. It implies the journey toward change should be guided more by self-love, by acknowledging the whole process rather than just stressing about how fast you're getting results.
Exactly. And if you need a really practical tool to help separate your own inner voice from all that overwhelming external noise, a digital detox can be remarkably effective. Seriously. It just gives you that necessary space for introspection. It quiets down the societal noise telling you who you should be and allows you to hear the genuine voice of the person you're actively trying to become. That quiet time boosts creativity too and helps reinforce the new wiring.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together for you listening. We've uncovered the biological reason why change is just fundamentally hard, that 2.5 times wiring against risk, and how to work with the RES filter by shifting your identity, not just your goals. We also looked at the absolute necessity of taking action boards and using ancient resonant practices like chanting or time in nature to shift your actual chemical state.
Yeah, and my final thought on this is simple, but I think profound. The states of stress and love, cortisol and oxytocin, they fundamentally cannot coexist. They are a seesaw. So the more deliberately you train your brain through things like time in nature, focused attention, purposeful action to occupy that oxytocin state, the less time your brain can physically spend locked in cortisol-driven stress mode. It really is a physical choice you make again and again.
And if you're sitting there right now, maybe wishing you'd started this journey of self-rewiring years ago, perhaps feeling a bit overwhelmed by the distance between where you are now and where you want to be, we want to leave you with one final, maybe provocative thought. The best time to plant an acorn was 200 years ago,
Yeah,
but the second best time,
that's right now.